Part 1. It all starts in your mind. Everything you live, everything you think you are, everything you receive, even what you reject, starts in a quiet and powerful place, your mind. And I'm not talking about that constant flow of thoughts that come and go like waves on the beach. I'm talking about the core, the real center from where you project your reality. Because yes, what you think is what you become. And it's not just a motivational phrase. It's a law that works whether you like it or not. For a long time, I lived under the illusion that life happened to me. I thought it was circumstances that defined my destiny. That luck, effort, the environment, or even what others thought of me were the deciding factors. But it wasn't like that. Until one day, in the middle of the most honest silence I had ever lived, I understood. My external world was simply a reflection of my inner world. What I thought constantly, what I felt, what I feared, what I repeated to myself over and over again in secret, was what I then saw manifested outside. It's not about thinking positively. It's not about repeating empty phrases. It's about understanding the deep power of every idea you hold. Because your thoughts are not just internal words. They are seeds. And each one of them has the power to become reality if you feed it with your attention, your emotion, and your faith. Imagine for a moment that everything you repeat to yourself is a direct order to the universe. What are you ordering it every day? Are you telling it that you don't deserve more? That you can't? That you're not enough? Or are you telling it that you're ready? That you trust? That your moment has come? When I started changing my internal dialogue, I didn't do it because I understood everything. I did it because I was tired. Tired of living in a reality that didn't truly reflect me. A reality that seemed like an echo of my fears, not of my dreams. And that's when the change started. Not outside. Not at work. Not with people. Inside. Changing a thought was like turning a key. A simple click. But that click unlocked doors I didn't even know existed. I began to see myself differently. And the world began to treat me differently. I started to think in possibilities. And possibilities began to appear. I started to trust. And life suddenly began to flow. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't luck. It was the direct consequence of daring to think differently. I invite you to do the same. Not because I say so, but because you've proven it to yourself many times. Do you remember those days when everything seemed to go well? Surely they weren't days without problems. But you were on a different frequency. You thought differently. You felt differently. And the world responded to you. You are what you think, because what you think defines what you feel, and what you feel dictates how you act. And how you act shapes your world. It's that simple. It's that powerful. It's that transformative. Part 2. The mind as the silent creator of realities. There's something that they don't teach you in school, at home, or in almost any other place. No one tells you that the mind is not just for thinking, solving problems, or remembering things. The mind is much more than that. It's a creative tool, a receiver antenna, a sender of frequencies, a factory of futures. And it doesn't matter if you believe in the spiritual, scientific, or intuitive side. All paths lead to the same truth. What you think will ultimately shape what you live. For years, I struggled to accept this idea. It seemed unfair, even cruel. How could I be responsible for everything that happened to me? Could I also be responsible for the pain, the rejection, the failure? But little by little, I understood that it wasn't about guilt, it was about power. And that makes all the difference. You are not to blame for what you think, especially if no one ever taught you how to observe your mind. But you are responsible for what you decide to keep in there. Because if your thoughts were like guests in your house, who would you let in? Would you allow someone who insults you, who humiliates you, who tells you every day that you can't anymore? Or would you invite that soft, clear, loving voice that reminds you of your worth even when you fail? Most of us, unknowingly, have allowed our minds to be filled with unwanted tenets. Phrases inherited from our parents, teachers, people who once heard us and then left, but left their echoes ringing in our internal walls. And the saddest part is that we start repeating those phrases as if they were truth, without questioning them, without filtering them, as if we had no choice. I had to do that work myself. Sit down with myself and ask the brutally honest question: what thoughts are shaping my life? What do I repeat every day without realizing it? What ideas are limiting me? What beliefs are pushing me down? And it was liberating, because I realized that many of them were absurd. Ideas like, I'm not good at this, I always fail, I'll never have what I want, I don't deserve this. Some weren't even mine. They came from comments I heard in my childhood, from comparisons, from silences, from open wounds. Yet they had governed my life as if they were sacred laws. So I began to ask myself, who said that? Do I really believe that? Or am I just repeating it because I've always thought it? And it was liberating, because I understood that I could create new beliefs, that I could teach my mind to see things differently, that I wasn't condemned to repeat what I was taught. I could choose my own truths. I started writing new beliefs, not as a list of empty words, but as decrees of the soul. I am enough just as I am. I deserve all the good that comes into my life. The universe conspires in my favor. Abundance flows to me easily. I am at peace with my past. I choose love even when I'm afraid. I read them out loud every morning. At first, I didn't feel it all the way, but I kept going. I persisted. I committed. And then, something miraculous happened. My mind started to accept those new ideas. My heart began to resonate with that frequency. And my life, little by little, began to align with those beliefs. Because your mind needs new references. If you only feed it with memories of pain, that's what it will project. But if you give it new images, new thoughts, new emotions, then it starts building a new reality. What seemed impossible before starts to feel natural. What seemed distant begins to come closer. Reality reorganizes when you reorganize from within. And here's a key point: you can't change your beliefs from judgment. You can't hate yourself for thinking negatively. You can't demand instant change. Because everything you reject gets reinforced. Everything you repress stays hidden but doesn't disappear. Real change happens when you observe yourself with compassion. When you look at your system of beliefs and say, "Thank you for protecting me, but I no longer need you. I now choose to see things differently." Then you begin to notice something very powerful. Life is not as it is, life is as you believe it is. The person who believes they have bad luck will attract situations that confirm it. Not because they have bad karma, but because they filter everything they experience through that idea. Every opportunity that arises is seen with suspicion. Every problem is interpreted as punishment. And so, without realizing it, they feed their own prison. But the person who believes they are being guided, who trusts in their worth, who knows they deserve the best, walks through the same world, but sees it differently. And because of that, they live it differently. And because of that, they transform it. That's why, today, I want to ask you a very simple but very powerful question. What do you really believe? Not what you say out loud. Not what you post on social media. What do you believe deep in your being? When no one is watching? When you're alone with yourself? What do you believe about yourself? Do you believe you're capable? That you are worthy? That you can achieve what you dream of? Or is there a little voice telling you no, that it's not for you, that it's better not to try? If that voice exists, don't silence it. Listen to it. And then, with love, respond, "Thank you for showing up. But now I choose something else." Because that's what you are, a being who can choose. A mind that can be reprogrammed. A consciousness capable of breaking any chain. You just need willpower, patience, and love for yourself. Part 3. Emotion is the fuel for creation. One of the great lies we've been told is that thinking is enough. That if you repeat a positive phrase 1,000 times, something in your life will change. But the truth is, thought without emotion has no power. It's not the phrase that transforms your reality, it's the energy that fuels it. You can say, "I am abundant" with your mouth, but if inside you feel scarcity, fear, or distrust, that's what you're sending to the universe. Because emotion is the frequency. Thought directs, but emotion drives. Thought is the seed, but emotion is the soil where you plant it. If that soil is dry, the seed won't sprout. If it's poisoned, the seed dies. But if it's nourished with faith, love, and certainty, then the miracle happens. And here's where I want to pause with you. Because this isn't easy. We are not used to feeling deeply. We were taught to control emotions, to deny them, not to cry, not to get angry, not to be afraid. And in doing so, emotions became trapped inside, creating blockages, tensions, and even illnesses. We began to disconnect from our bodies, which is the place where emotions speak. We started living from the head, forgetting that we are a complete system: mind, heart, body, and soul. I lived many years this way, trying to convince myself with empty affirmations, not realizing that I didn't feel anything when I said them. And that's why they didn't work. Until one day, tired of the struggle, I sat in silence and allowed myself to feel it all. The fear, the rage, the sadness, the frustration. I didn't run. I didn't deny. I just breathed and stayed there. And in the middle of that emotional whirlwind, I understood that that was the real starting point. Feeling is healing. Feeling is transformation. When you give space to your emotions without judging them, without repressing them, without dramatizing them, you free them. And when you free them, you clear the channel through which the creative energy can flow. That's when my thoughts began to have real power. Because they were no longer just mental ideas, they were felt thoughts, charged with authentic energy. I no longer said, "I am enough," just with words. I said it with my soul. I said it with tears in my eyes and my chest open. And then the universe listened. Coherence is the key. Think, feel, and act in alignment. That's the sacred triad of manifestation. If you only think but don't feel, nothing moves. If you only feel but don't act, you stagnate. If you act without thinking or feeling, you lose your way. But when the three align, something powerful happens. You enter into harmony with your being. And here's the most beautiful part. You already know how to do it. You've done it before, even if you don't remember. Have you ever desired something so strongly, so certainly, so clearly, that it simply happened? Have you ever had a premonition so deep that you knew, without proof, that something was coming? That's connection. That's conscious creation. That's personal power. What happens is that we get used to living on autopilot. Reacting. Surviving. Going through the days solving things without stopping to look inside. But real change happens when you become the creator, not the victim. When you realize that you don't need anything outside of you to be free. You just need to change yourself. The question is no longer, how do I make the world change? But, how can I change to live a different world? And that, my friend, is where the real magic happens. Because every time you choose a new thought, every time you hold it with an elevated emotion, and every time you take a step from that energy, you're writing a new destiny. You're reprogramming your mind, your heart, and your vibration. That's what we are, energy in motion. And that energy responds to what you truly feel, not what you fake. Sometimes people ask me, what if I can't feel something positive? What if I'm sad, frustrated, angry? And I always answer the same thing. Then start right there. Don't deny it. Don't hide it with empty words. Embrace what you feel and move through the emotion. Because on the other side of that sadness is peace. On the other side of fear is freedom. On the other side of rage is truth. The only way is through. And when you walk through it, something incredible happens. You begin to reclaim your power. Not the power to control everything, but the power to choose how you live every moment. And that, believe me, changes everything. Part 4. The invisible power of your beliefs. One of the most uncomfortable yet powerful revelations is understanding that the world is not as it is. The world is as you are. Not because everything revolves around you, but because you filter everything through your perception. What you see, what affects you, what you interpret, what you believe, it all goes through you first. If you wake up with a heavy emotion, everything that happens around you will seem more difficult. If you wake up with gratitude, with openness, you'll notice beauty even in the simplest details. Because you're not seeing the reality as it is. You're seeing the reality according to your frequency, according to your inner state. And that's not punishment or manipulation. It's the greatest gift that exists. Because if your external world reflects your internal world, it means you have the power to change everything without needing to control anyone else. You just need to change yourself. Of course, at first, it's hard. The ego wants to convince us that the blame is outside. That if your partner, your boss, your city, your past changed, you'd be happy. But that's a trap. Because you can change jobs, partners, or countries, but if your internal dialogue stays the same, you'll eventually repeat the same story. The same conflict. The same emptiness. I've seen it countless times, people who change their lives on the outside, but are still prisoners on the inside. Because it's not the environment that frees us, it's our way of relating to it. And I learned that the day I stopped looking for culprits and started looking within. That was when everything changed. I began to notice how the people who seemed difficult to me were just showing me parts of myself that were not healed. How situations that frustrated me were lessons in disguise. How the limits I encountered outside were the same I had inside. It was painful because looking in the mirror is not always pleasant. But it was also liberating, because I finally stopped waiting for something outside to save me. I understood that I didn't need the world to change. I needed to change my vibration. And this is the key. It's not about changing the world. It's about changing the way you relate to it. It's not about denying what happens, nor about justifying the unjustifiable. It's about understanding where you're living it from. What is it showing you? What part of you is asking to be healed? Because when you heal within, the mirror transforms. You no longer need others to change for you to feel worthy. You no longer need to control anything to feel at peace. You no longer need everything to go well to trust. You start living from within outwards. And something magical happens. The world begins to respond to you differently. Not because you're forcing it, but because you no longer need anything. You're not waiting for the world to complete you. You've already completed yourself. You're the one emitting everything, the one offering everything. And that's when you realize that you don't need to convince anyone of anything. You no longer have to shout, or explain, or prove. You just need to be there, to shine. As you've always been, a living expression of consciousness, a human being on the path, a spark of the universe awakening to its own truth. Everything you've heard up until now, it's not a theory. It's an invitation for you to take back the power that belongs to you, to think with awareness, to feel with freedom, to believe in yourself, to speak with respect, to choose your beliefs with courage, to see the world as a reflection, to return to yourself again and again. And now, here, in this very moment, take a pause. Breathe. Close your eyes if you like. Bring your attention to your inner world and ask yourself, what thoughts do I want to plant today? What emotion do I want to hold? What version of myself am I ready to remember? Because there's no one else but you. No one more important than you. No one with more power to transform your life than you. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for more security, more money, more time, more certainties. Start now, where you are, with what you have, with what you feel, with your voice, with your flame, with your soul. Because if there's something you'll understand after this journey, let it be this. You become what you think. And if you think with love, with faith, and with purpose, you'll become light. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for returning. Thank you for choosing yourself. This is not the end. It's the true beginning. Part 5, Your Inner Dialogue. The voice that shapes your destiny. There is a voice that accompanies you from the moment you wake up until you go to sleep. Sometimes it's kind, other times not so much. It's that inner voice that comments on you, on your life, on what you do, what you don't do, what you should do. It's your silent narrator, your judge, your critic, or your best friend if you learn how to transform it. Your inner dialogue is not just a mental habit. It's a foundational structure of your reality. It's the way you interpret your own existence. And the curious thing is that we almost never question it. We accept what it tells us as if it were the absolute truth, when in reality, it's just an interpretation based on old data, old wounds, old beliefs. When I started to consciously listen to that voice, I realized that for years, I had been speaking badly to myself. It was like having an enemy inside me who always found something to criticize. That wasn't enough. You could have done better. Why even try if you already know how this ends? And the worst part was that I believed it. I didn't argue. I didn't question it. I just accepted it. And that's how I lived, among achievements that I didn't celebrate because I always thought something was missing, among attempts I abandoned before I started because I was already convinced they would fail. I lived trapped in a cage of words that I reinforced day after day. But one day, as happens in all awakenings, I stopped. I asked myself, what if this voice is wrong? What if it's lying to me? What if I can talk to myself differently? I started a practice that at first seemed ridiculous. Every time I caught myself saying something negative, I would write it down. Then I would read it aloud. And then I would counter it, like my own defense lawyer. Because if someone spoke to me the way I spoke to myself, I would walk away without hesitation. So why tolerate it inside? That's how a new practice was born in my life, consciously choosing my inner dialogue. I started to speak to myself differently. At first, it was hard. The old voice was still there, with its sarcastic, ironic tone. But little by little, the new voice began to gain strength. Not because it shouted louder, but because it was truer, more loving, more real. When I started speaking to myself with respect, my energy shifted. When I began to say, "You're doing the best you can," instead of, "It's not enough," something within me relaxed. When I changed, "This is going to go wrong," for, "This is an opportunity to grow," everything around me started to shift. And that's not magic, it's coherence. The way you speak to yourself is the way you treat yourself. And the way you treat yourself is the foundation of how you position yourself in the world. If you speak to yourself with contempt, you close yourself off. You shrink. You disconnect. But if you speak to yourself with kindness, you expand. You assert yourself. You allow yourself to shine. Do you know how everything changes when you're with someone who speaks to you with love, who looks at you with faith, who lifts you with their presence? Well, imagine if you could be that person for yourself. Imagine if every morning you woke up with a voice that said, "Let's go, today you can too." That doesn't just change your day. It changes your life. And the inner dialogue is not an accessory, it's a tool. It's an inexhaustible source of transformation if you learn to use it consciously. You can reprogram how you see yourself, how you respond, the energy you project. Everything, absolutely everything, begins with how you talk to yourself. Some people tell me, "I can't help thinking this way, it's automatic." And I reply, "Of course, because you've practiced it for years. But you can train yourself to think differently. The mind is like a muscle. What you repeat the most strengthens. What you stop feeding weakens. If you keep repeating every day that you can't, your mind becomes a wall. But if you repeat every day that you can, even if you don't feel it at first, your mind becomes a bridge. And that's what we need: more bridges and fewer walls. More voices of love and fewer self-destructive criticisms. More internal understanding and less self-punishment. Because in the end of the day, you are the only person who will always be with you. So you better get along with yourself. Speak kindly to yourself. Take care of yourself from within. Today I want to invite you to make a promise. A small but powerful promise. That from now on, every time your inner voice tries to sabotage you, you'll be there, attentive, present, ready to respond with love. Not with violence, not with judgment, but with firmness and compassion. You will say, "That no longer represents me. I don't speak to myself like that. I am my best ally." And if you do that once, and then again and again, one day that new voice will become your primary voice. And then, my friend, you'll start living from a very different place. From confidence. From peace. From true power. Because yes, you become what you think. But even more than that, you become what you tell yourself. What you repeat. What you choose to believe about yourself. And if that's the case, then choose wisely. Choose with love. Choose with faith. Your life is a constant conversation with yourself. Let that conversation be bright, expansive, and true. Because you deserve to be your best word. Part 6. The reflection of the world. Your reality as a mirror. One of the most uncomfortable yet powerful revelations is understanding that the world is not as it is. The world is as you are. Not because everything revolves around you, but because you filter everything through your perception. What you see, what affects you, what you interpret, what you believe, everything goes through you first. If you wake up with a heavy emotion, everything around you will seem more difficult. If you wake up with gratitude, with openness, you'll notice beauty even in the simplest details. Because you're not seeing reality as it is. You're seeing reality through your frequency, through your inner state. And that's not punishment or manipulation. It's the greatest gift that exists. Because if your external world reflects your internal world, it means you have the power to change everything without needing to control anyone else. You just need to change yourself. Of course, at first, it's difficult. The ego wants to convince us that the blame is outside. That if your partner, your boss, your city, your past changed, then you'd be happy. But that's a trap. Because you can change jobs, partners, or countries, but if your internal dialogue remains the same, you'll eventually repeat the same story. The same conflict. The same emptiness. I've seen it many times, people who change their life on the outside, but are still prisoners on the inside. Because it's not the environment that frees us, it's how we relate to it. And I learned that the day I stopped looking for culprits and started looking within. That was when everything changed. I began to notice how the people who once seemed difficult to me were only showing me aspects of myself that were still unhealed. How situations that frustrated me were lessons disguised as problems. How the limits I encountered outside were the same limits I had inside. It was painful because looking in the mirror is not always pleasant. But it was also liberating. Because I finally stopped waiting for something external to save me. I understood that I didn't need the world to change. I needed to change my vibration. And here's the key, it's not about changing the world. It's about changing how you relate to it. It's not about denying what happens, nor justifying the unjustifiable. It's about understanding where you're experiencing it from. What is it showing you? What part of you is asking to be healed? Because when you heal within, the mirror transforms. You no longer need others to change for you to feel worthy. You no longer need to control anything to feel at peace. You no longer need everything to go perfectly for you to trust. You begin to live from within outwards. And something magical happens. The world begins to respond to you differently. Not because you're forcing it, but because you no longer need anything. You're not waiting for the world to complete you. You've already completed yourself. You're the one emitting everything. You're the one offering everything. And that's when you realize that you no longer need to convince anyone of anything. You no longer have to shout. You no longer have to explain. You no longer have to prove. You just need to be there, to shine, as you've always been, a living expression of consciousness, a human being on the path, a spark of the universe awakening to its own truth. Everything you've heard up until now is not a theory. It's an invitation to take back the power that belongs to you, to think consciously, to feel freely, to believe in yourself, to speak with respect, to choose your beliefs with courage, to see the world as a reflection, to return to yourself again and again. And now, here, in this very moment, take a pause. Breathe. Close your eyes if you like. Bring your attention to your inner world and ask yourself, what thoughts do I want to plant today? What emotion do I want to hold? What version of myself am I ready to remember? Because there's no one else but you. No one more important than you. No one with more power to transform your life than you. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for more security, more money, more time, more certainties. Start now, where you are, with what you have, with what you feel, with your voice, with your flame, with your soul. Because if there's something you'll understand after this journey, let it be this. You become what you think. And if you think with love, with faith, and with purpose, you'll become light. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for returning. Thank you for choosing yourself. This is not the end. It's the true beginning. Part 7. The return to you, remembering who you are. You've made it to this point. And if you've made it, it's no accident. No one listens to a message like this by chance. Something inside of you, deeper than the mind, older than your memories, has brought you here. A silent, wise part of you that has been waiting patiently for you to return. Because all this time, beyond the thoughts, the emotions, the beliefs, and the words, what you were really looking for was you. Your true essence. Your light. Your power. Your peace. Not that version of you that adapts to please others, that tries to fit in, that repeats what it learned without questioning it. I'm talking about you. The one you were before the fears, before the noise, before the masks. The being who looks from behind your eyes, who breathes with you, who has always been there. That you who doesn't need approval because you already feel enough. Who doesn't compete because you already know you're unique. Who doesn't need to prove anything because you already are everything. Returning to you is the most radical and revolutionary act you can do. In a world that constantly pushes you outward, that distracts you, that confuses you, returning to yourself is like lighting a candle in the middle of a storm. It's small at first, but if you protect it, if you nurture it, if you stay close, that flame becomes fire. And that fire is your guide, your truth, your way. Returning to yourself is stopping looking for in others what you can only give yourself. It's stopping begging for love and starting to offer it. It's stopping chasing answers and starting to listen to them within. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You just need to decide. Take a step. Breathe. Listen to yourself. Honor what you feel. Say yes when it's yes and no when it's no. Stand your ground. Respect your energy. Care for your mind. Close cycles. Open doors. Embrace yourself, even when you don't understand everything. Because returning to yourself isn't a destination. It's a daily practice. A path you choose every time you remind yourself. And yes, you'll stumble. You'll get lost again. Sometimes the fear will speak loudly again. Sometimes your old voice will try to take over. Sometimes you'll doubt. And that's okay. You're not failing. You're learning. You're growing. You're returning. Every day is an opportunity to come back. To observe yourself with more love. To choose with more clarity. To honor who you truly are. And when you live from that place, something shifts in the world. Not because you're forcing it, but because you no longer need anything. You're not waiting for life to complete you. You are already complete. You're the one emitting everything. You're the one creating everything. And that's when you realize you don't need to convince anyone of anything. You no longer have to shout. You no longer have to explain. You no longer have to prove. You just need to be. Be present. Shine. And that's the true power. Now, I want to leave you with this. You are enough. You've always been enough. The change you're seeking has always been inside of you. You've just been waiting for the right moment to remember it. And now you know. It's now. It's time to remember. It's time to return. You are the creator. You are the light. You are the one who decides.